Well, this morning on Media and Society, we look at media coverage of kings, queens, and royal families. And the second discussion will be whether being a journalist makes you a good spokesperson or a spin doctor. Well, hello and welcome to Media and Society on SABC News. We're independent and impartial. My name is Naledi Molao. Now, this is where we look at the intersection between media and audiences. And of course, as always, the show is not complete without your say. So do connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag SABC Media and Society on Twitter, or give us a call on 011-714-6841 or 011-714-6842. Well, from Al Jazeera, which is headquartered in Doha in the Middle East, to the BBC, which is headquartered in London in Britain, the coronation or ukungena esibayeni of King Misuzulu Gazwelithini of AmaZulu was shown to audiences from different parts of the world. South Africa has the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act number 41 of 2003, which really aims to promote and protect the institution of traditional leadership in the country. But beyond celebrations, funerals, and other ceremonies, how does South Africa's media report on traditional leadership in the country?
The media doesn't really cover enough. It only covers mostly on the negative effects on the royalty families. Let's say maybe there's an incident that happened that affected everything negatively. That's when the media will only, let me say, broadly broadcast everything. But then when there's something positive being impacted, I think the media is just kind of outshadowing everything.
It's more biased. There's a sense of disrespect, particularly on the black culture. They don't give it the same weight as the royalty families in England. We are portrayed as, subdued. They always find gaps or things that would be insulting to the black culture.
They're not accurate. Some of the things, if there is problem, that's where we get the different information from what we expected.
We are too modernized to such an extent that most of us, most black people even forgot their own roots. I understand. So the only time that the media covers is into about royalty and stuff. It's only when there's stuff, let's say maybe a conflict.
One of the things that contributes to the lacking of the coverage in the media is because in South Africa we have quite a number of royal families. We have the Tswana people, the Botswana people have their own Debeles. We also have one in the Pedi region also. So I feel like it's quite diverse and there's a couple of royal families. However, I do feel like it's quite limited compared to other countries because they get more extensive coverages from the beginning, when they are born, where a royal prince is born, there's coverage there. However, with us, it's more of big events like the crowning or other certain things. It's not general coverage. So I feel like, yes, we are very limited in terms of how we cover them.
Yeah, those are the views of the everyday South African, and you can share your views on that discussion as well by giving us a call on 011-714-6842 or 6841. Again, on Twitter, hashtag SABC Media Society. Well, joining me for this discussion is Controlesa's General Secretary, Mr. Zolani Mkiva, and also we are joined by, from the National House of Traditional Leaders, Nkosikazi Nomandla Mhlauli. I'm also joined by Professor Mosaqulu, who is the founder of Indonza Yesizwe. But let's start in the studio. Mama, thank you so much for joining us, and a good afternoon to you, Nkosikazi. Good morning, rather.
Good morning, Nadia. Good morning to the viewers.
Yes, and Dr. Mkiva, I know that I asked earlier, the right way to address you would be Umntwana Wenkosi. I think everyone recognizes your face as Imbongi, and very much, I think, a very prominent face for our traditional expression in the country for a very long time. So I really want to start with you and say, when we saw the coronation of the Zulu King being covered across the country, what were your thoughts about how the media performed?
It was a very good projection. It was a very good approach, and it's something that we have to learn from. And we are happy that there has been a great improvement, even on the part of our national broadcaster, the SABC, but there is still a lot that needs to be done. So it was a very good example, because the institution of traditional leadership could be used as a major export for our country to promote who we are as a people, the beauty of our uniqueness and our antiquity as a people. Because the centrality of the institution of traditional leadership as a custodian of culture, custodian of land, and custodian of people's values, morality, and spirituality is very key, because it gives a clear picture and definition and description of who we are positively out there in the world. So we have been portrayed in good light as a people who still uphold their culture through that coronation. And I think that this is something that could be extended to the different cultural ramification of our country, to portray our diversity in unity. And there's beauty, there's spectrum, there's colorfulness in that, and it's something that we can export for the world to consume, for the world to be attracted to our shores. It can promote our heritage, it can promote our tourism, and it can have a very important installment in terms of our economic spin-offs that we can draw from that.
Yes. Mama, what did you think of how the media covered? And Dadumkiva, obviously, giving us some positive feedback, but I'm ready to hear the criticism as well.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this platform. We've been looking for this. Thank you very much. I fully agree with Utwanini and other speakers there. But mine I was just thinking whether the media was there because they know that there were issues. There were fights before, there are still issues in the kingdom. Maybe they were just there to see if is it going to be done well, or there still be disputes. But as much as I appreciate that when you showed our culture and the way we dress and the unity, it was showed when we saw also people from Swatini. That was very beautiful. But I was saying, I'm sure that they were there because they know that there are issues in the kingdom.
So you think the media was there to see if the power dynamics were going to play out during the coronation?
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
That is the way I took it.
That's interesting, and I think we're going to explore that a little bit, but we are joined by Professor Musaqulu, who's the founder of Indon's ISCs. Prof, a good afternoon to you. I think just to start us off, your view on how South African media covered the coronation of the Zulu King. And once again, I'm happy to hear the criticism.
Let me say good morning. It being just after 9 this morning.
Good morning, Prof.
I saw Zolani Mkiva there, and we spoke a little bit at Nongoma. The media coverage was actually very good. I must say, though, that the SABC was on and off, a little bit on the lukewarm side on that Saturday. Your other neighbors there, whose name starts with an E, were there full-time throughout the day. And they actually showed the details of the event. I think that although some people from afar think that there are disputes in the Zulu kingdom and the kingship, there are actually no disputes. There's nothing that says that King Misuzulu is not the rightful king. There would be people making noises on the sidelines. There's always like that in families. But if you look at the 20,000 odd people that came there, if you look at the cultural display that happened there, if you look at the speeches, if you look at the visitations by kings from Congo, DRC, from Malawi, from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, and even more are coming when we go to Moses Mabhida Stadium. I think it was not opportunistic. It was an event that the media could simply not afford to ignore. I must say, though, that as you rightly said in the beginning, and some people are saying, there's a tendency to want to focus on events. The institution itself is not an events-based institution. It's an institution of traditional leadership and kingship. It's an institution that impacts lives of people on a daily basis. I know, as you cited, the 2003 Act as well as the 2019 Act,
Yes.
that there are no efforts by government to regulate some of the things. Of course, it's very good, because if you don't regulate, everyone will wake up in the morning
Yeah, I think I've lost you there,
wanting
Prof.
to be a king.
Okay.
As we saw, suddenly everyone wants to be a king because it looks so nice to be a king. you eventually.
Yeah, Prof, that line is giving us
Just
some trouble, so I'm going to
celebrated
just jump
and so
in
on,
there,
and they
Prof,
think it's an easy-
only because that line is giving us some trouble. But the reason why we're really having this discussion today is to really talk about how South Africa covers royalty across the board, not just with what we saw with the king of AmaZulu in the country. The reality is you do have the various traditional leaders within the Tswana culture, so many cultures that really aren't given the same coverage. But as soon as we cover something that's happening in the British Royal House, we give it full attention, right? Why do you think that is still happening? The argument that Mkiva is that that we have too many traditional leaders in South Africa, and that if we covered all of them, we'd never finish.
It can't be a good reason enough to say you should not cover simply because there's too many. In fact, in terms of the people of this country, there are not too many, they are just enough for them to be the leaders of their respective communities. All we need to do is to take responsibility and give the necessary support by ensuring that we give the right coverage to all these cultural communities of our country. They have a right to be heard. We should have all sorts of programs, magazine programs that are focused on African leadership and royalty. We can have even reality shows which begin to show the roles and functions of our queens in this motherland. It is something that we ought to do. And the reason why it has not happened to date is that the broadcasting and media represents the hegemony of a particular cultural community that dominates the public domain, and being that which is more Eurocentric, so to say. Even here in the home front, we are dominated by a minority culture. The fact that we are now conversing in a language which comes from outside is a continuation of that kind of domination. So we must begin to say, let's use media as an instrument of social transformation, and we must focus on programming that begins to bring to the fore and the mainstream that which has been relegated for too long. And the institution of traditional leadership is that which I'm talking about. That must be mainstreamed, that must be foregrounded, so that we can begin to really decolonize the mindset of our communities in terms of the narrative that has been given through miseducation by the apartheid infrastructure and coloniality. So unless we do that, then SABC will not be seen as an instrument of social transformation and cohesion. So you must take responsibility as a broadcaster that you bring really indeed these programs that on daily basis, as the Prof says, it must not be a ceremonial thing, it must not be an event-based thing, it must be a continuation of public discourse, educating society about this institution. And that's part of really liquidating completely the culture of coloniality and its miseducation that it has imparted on our people. Then we can begin to deal with a whole range of issues that affect us as a result of that, including violence.
Right. Mama, let me ask you this. Why does it matter? Why does it matter to the South African public that we're able to continuously display our traditional leadership? Does it impact the viewership in any way, in your view?
Let me first say, I would be happy if I can be able to understand the actual mandate of media. Maybe I've got a different mandate, I don't know. But for me, for instance, as I'm regarded as the first woman to be the chair of the National House of Traditional and Cohesion Leaders, how often have you ever talked to me and checked how do I feel and what I'm looking forward to do. You've never done that. It was just a done deal. No media.
And it was quiet.
It was just quiet. No media covered my story as a woman. I may also be saying sometimes you may be a part of patriarchy because you always sometimes you consider even in traditional leadership you always consider amadoda. Leaving us as women, as Uqani is saying that we have got our role here as mothers, as mama bakomkhulu, because we have got structures there. We have got we are so organized, but we don't go to and check on what we are doing. But now mine is just to say we are there. As we've got houses of traditional leaders, that is starting from local up to, in fact, starting from the traditional council and up to the National House of Traditional and Constitutional Leaders. We have got our organization. It is also organized. It has got committees. We have got committees in the houses. We have got committees in our organization. We have got more, in fact, we are more organized even in the kingdoms. There. Right. So I think for you to move forward, just go down to those structures I'm talking about. You'll get more. For instance, we have launched our invest rural strategy as traditional leaders. You know nothing about it. It talks to everything.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that one, Mama, but I want to do that in a moment, right? And say perhaps the responsibility really is all of our responsibility and say, what have we actually done to make sure that Contralesa and the National House of Traditional Leaders are more visible, not just from a media's point of view, but from the organization's point of view as well. But let's quickly take a call. We've got Thando Mahlangu on the line. A good morning to you, ma'am. Ngiyaphila, Baba. Thank you so much for calling.
Sithokoze man, ibizo lami nginguthando Mahlangu, ngiyindebele activist. Engifuna ukuveza lapho ukuthi imedia ayikhavari izinto ezenzeke emakhosini ekhethu. Ene nabangazikhavariko kwenza ukuthi sibone ukuthi amakhosi ekhethu awanamandla ngoba qala umbuso obusako njenganje uthethe amandla wawathathela amakhosi ekhethu. So nje okwenzeka ukuthi amakhosi ekhethu asiwazi ukuthi ahlalapi and iphimbo labo alizwakali, abana voice out there, and as a result njenge SABC qala for example aninasi story samandebele lokho kukhombisa ukuthi iculture amandebele ayikwazi ukuvela, ilimo lamandebele ayikwazi ukuvela, iheritage amandebele ayikwazi ukuvela. So now imedia iyakhetha isivezela kakhulu into ezesikhuwa ezenzeka ngesikhuwa ngoba bafuna ukulimaza abantu bekhethu emkhumbulweni ukuthi bangacabangi yonke into ephethelene nelimo neculture. Imedia yenza ukuthi abantu bekhethu bangazi ukuthi ilanguage neculture zi-important kangangani. So now as a result amakhosi ekhethu awanamandla. Qala musuma uyatsho ukuthi ujamele abantu be-traditional kodwana asazi ngaye. Mina ngiyathoma umbona namhlanje kuza njani abo baba ngaphambilini bakhavara bona emedia and nanje into ekade yenzeka KwaZulu Natal iyenzeke eMandebeleni, iyenzeka ngoNzuza noManalo kodwana into ezinjalo azikakhavarwa. Umlando wekhethu awukhavarwa. Namhlanje ilimi lesindebele alikho.
Can I ask you a question? Do we know you? Are you the gentleman who was kicked out of a shopping mall for wearing a traditional garb?
You see exactly the fact that I was kicked out ngimbethe into ezesikhethu ngimbethe isindebele lokho kusikhombisa ukuthi imedia ayidlali role ngaphandle le, ayidlali role ukufundisa abantu ukuthi kuhle kuhle na Africa eAfrica simbatha isikhumba, simbatha isikhethu. Manje imedia kufanele idlali role ukuthi sikwazi ukufundisa nabantwana abancane abasakhulako nabasezako ukuthi isiko lakho nepilo nesikopilo yakho ibalulekile, neheritage yakho ibalulekile. Ngoba qala nestory samaswati asikho ngaphathi kwe-SABC ngoba kungiyo i-only public broadcaster. Isitori sesindebele asikho SABC.
Yeah, but Mahlangu, thank you so much for calling. I really appreciate the call. If you remember Mr. Thando Mahlangu, he was walking through a shopping mall in his traditional regalia and was kicked out by security. I think we all remember that video going viral in the country. We're going to take a short break, but perhaps when we come back, we start talking about then what do we do How do our cultures become more visible? That caller right there, Mr. Matlang, was saying, well, the Ndebele culture isn't visible in this country. They don't know our leaders. We don't know anything about them. The media houses do not give us the visibility and respect that we want. And here's the reality. You can go into many cultures in this country and you're going to hear the same argument. We'll talk about what we do on the other side of this. Welcome back. Well, we continue our discussion here on media and society about how the media covers traditional leaders in the country. And I'm in conversation with Contralesa's General Secretary, Mr. Zolani Mkiva, from the National House of Traditional Leaders, Nkosikazi Nomandla Mhlauli. And I'm also joined by Professor Musa Xulu, who's the founder of Indonsa Yesizwe. We've got Herman in Stellenbosch on the line. Herman, good morning to you. Thanks for calling.
Good morning.
Thanks for calling in. What are your thoughts?
Yes, listen, I'm the son of a professor at Stellenbosch University, but I'm also an Afrikaner and a member of the Pretorius family from my mother's side. Now, I would like to exclamate the fact that the Pretorius family is an official royal family, and that we also have a role to play in South African society out of a royal perspective.
Okay. Essentially, though, we're talking now about whether or not media coverage of royal houses is sufficient. What are your thoughts on that particularly?
Well, specifically out of the Afrikaner perspective, it is very important that we also get official royal coverage for the Pretorius royal family in South African media.
Okay. I didn't even know that there was an Afrikaans royal family in the country. This is the reality. And this is what the point I made earlier, is that within the Tswana culture, you've got Bakhatla, Batlokwa, Bafokeng. There's all these leaders that exist and we don't celebrate them enough. Professor Xulu, I'm going to bring you in here and say, why does it matter that we cover the leadership of traditional leaders in the country? And do you think that really we place too much emphasis on traditional or royal leadership from across the globe? And what does it matter?
Yeah, no, definitely there's too much emphasis on traditional leadership from England and from other parts of the world. That is because we were colonized by England, and it's unfortunate. But I would love to say something as well about how you get the media involved in your affairs. It does not happen automatically. You need to be internally conscious of what you are doing, but also wanting to cement it among yourselves first, not for the media. The media comes in because it looks at authenticity of the traditional experience. I saw, for example, when the last Zulu king passed away in 2021, you saw the spectacular display of the warriors, Amabuto sing traditional Amahubo songs, walking long distances from Durban, walking long distances to come here, to come to Wanongoma on foot, singing single-mindedness and so on. What needs to happen is that through Indonsa Yesizwe, we've spoken to other Makos, and it's what I was going to discuss with Zolani. You need to build in an internal structure of generating knowledge within each traditional leadership system, so that you can attract media from outside. You can attract non-Botswana, for example. I saw that at Nongoma, there were lots of non-Zulus who came down there. But it's because I think, and I'm not highlighting just the Zulus because I'm a Zulu, I think the Zulus have worked very hard against all odds, defeating colonialism, defeating apartheid, using the traditional leadership system. it was very prominent. The traditional leadership system of the Zulu were very prominent in the years leading to 1994, fighting for the king of the Zulus to be recognized as a king in the Constitution of South Africa. That was done in 1994 to 1996 in the interim constitution. But also getting Ingonyama, all the land that was under the Zulu homeland, to be under Ingonyama Trust. I think that was big. You have to be on your own side, you have to affirm yourselves and be aggressively looking to protect that which is yours, not only protect, but preserve and actively, proactively promote. The media will not miss that. I mean, one of the biggest stories.
Yeah, I think, and that's the challenge really that I wanted to bring to you, Mai, and say, well, how much of what the media is failing to do is really because we haven't quite seen enough activity from our traditional leaders. And I'm going to come back to you quickly, but we've got another caller on the line. Is it Daniel? Michael in Lehurutsi. Michael, good morning to you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hey, thank you for calling that.
Yes. Mama, challenge more Lehurutsi, more Dinokal. Challenge ya makehore re na le bokgotsi go ya ka tsalo ya bokgotsi mare challenge ke gore government ya rona ga e kgone go lebella gore di dispute tse di leng teng e di kgakanya le bokgotsi ke ka re bokgotsi boalo bokgotsi bo sale so go la batho ba ka kontre ba se le bokgotsi ba lwa tsa bokgotsi mare government is just holding their arms ha ba re ke bare must sit together and do. How can we go le bokgotsi bo bua bo lwa le bo lwantshwa ke batho ba kwante government e ntse mo fatshe mari dilo di senega mo motseng.
You see, No, thank you so much for calling. So, Michael in Lehurutsi is essentially saying that you have disputes of leadership within traditional leaders, and he feels that government doesn't even try to resolve that issue. And now we want to come here and talk about media coverage. What do you say to that, Mama? And that was the challenge, I suppose, that I wanted to give to you, and what we heard from Professor Kulu as well, is that, well, perhaps there needs to be a strengthening of traditional leadership in the structures that we already have. Is there a strengthening that the National House of Traditional Leaders in and of itself needs to do in its own functions?
Thank you very much, Naledi. Let me start by saying, let's not, we're not talking about traditional leadership, especially kingdoms. Let's not try to say this one is better than this one, because some are at least are more advanced because of the resources. Let's start there. But what is important here, as custodians of culture and customs, when you go down there, you will find out that all we're talking about that needs to be done. It is there. Even the information, it is there. But it's just that there's not enough coverage of that. You focus on those areas which are already there. You don't want to go down to those smaller groups. But as the National House of Traditional Cohesion Leaders, we have done a lot on trying to promote our cultures. We've been inviting working with some of the organizations. As Utata was saying, there's part of one of the organizations assisting Ubukos. But what is important now is for us to come together as we are talking now. Moving forward is about moving forward now with you as media, as a partner now, partnering with you, finding out how do we go down to those smaller groups, because you can't start up there, not starting with the smaller groups. It is we are there as through our committee of tradition, culture and customs at the National House of Traditional and Cohesion Leaders. We have got that committee that deals with that. Also, we're also working with the moral regeneration movement on those issues, together with our organization, which is Contralesa.
When we get to Contralesa, I think that Contralesa is quite visible a lot of the time when we have these sorts of discussions. What do you think is your call to action, not just to the media, but from official structures that are within our very own government, like the National House of Traditional Leaders. Let's be honest about what we still need to get right and get that call to action.
Well, I am very clear. I agree with what Professor Gulu says, and I agree what Mhlauli says. And I think what they say complement each other. But I want to say that over and above the general media, I want to focus myself to that one which has a public mandate, which is a public broadcaster. The public broadcaster can no longer act as it used to act pre-1994. You ought to realize that you've got a responsibility to do what he was talking about ensuring that this institution is preserved, protected, and promoted. And therefore, like you have a presidential bureau chief, you must have a bureau chief that is responsible for traditional affairs. This is a responsibility on your part as a public broadcaster. So I want to say, therefore, that the National House, we fight for the coverage of the National House. The National House every year does an opening of the National House, and it also does the debate of the speech of the president in the National House. All of those events are not carried live. For the last 20 years, it hasn't happened. And as Contralesa we have been saying, you have a duty, primarily as SABC, to ensure that that event is covered the same way as the State of the Nation address is covered. Because it's a key, important event in the calendar of the year. And it begins to mainstream the role of traditional leadership. I'm just making an example with that. But when there are problems of initiation and everything,
we are there.
You are there
Yes.
in full force. But come the time of the homecoming of those boys who come healthy out of the institution of traditional initiation, you are not there on those graduation ceremonies. And these are very important landmarks in terms of the institution of tradition on annual basis.
Can you imagine what beautiful coverage that would be? To see the boys come back and to celebrate that as a country, that's the stuff that we really need to be covering, and I couldn't agree more. Prof. Kulu, I want to come back to you with this one and then say, do you think that that kind of coverage will bring back the relevance of our tradition and culture and its leadership in South Africa?
No, definitely it will. It will, but we must build in knowledge into the traditional leadership system and bring in knowledge. You must know that the knowledge system that governs traditional leadership system is not the Western knowledge. It's traditional or indigenous knowledge system. It's different. And most of the time, we will find that in terms of government, it's still more of being linked because of in the colonial system, because of you walk into union buildings, you sit there and you find that the colonial system has done this and this and that. So I'm saying that maybe what we need to do, and the National House of Traditional Leaders stands a much better place to can bring all of us together. We in Indonza Sizwe, working with universities and academics and everyone, as well as Contralesa and other traditional leadership systems, we should be able to come together and work on the issue of the knowledge, so that, for example, why must the boys go to the mountain? That needs to be explained and become part of the folklore of South Africa, so that even those people who don't do that kind of culture can understand its significance.
Right.
Otherwise,
the criticism will continue. Criticism will continue. Prof, I have to leave it there. Yeah. I have to leave it there, unfortunately, Prof. I am out of time. But I really have appreciated this discussion, and I appreciate the call to action. And I think it's a call to action for all of us that we continue doing our work. And what we saw of that beautiful coverage of the coronation of the King of AmaZulu, let's do that with more cultures and keep holding us to account
There is
as well.
something important that would have made an omission if we don't correct. There is no Afrikaner royal family in South Africa. That is not correct. And we can't just leave it like that. We may have members of royal family who are here, maybe they are in exile from other parts of the world. But in South Africa, the only royal families that are here and only traditional leaders that are here recognized are Africans and the natives of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That they're the General Secretary of Contralesa, Mr. Zolani Mkiva Mamhlauli, as well as the Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders, and Professor Musa Xulu, the founder of Indods ISizwe. It's been a fascinating discussion, and we can continue it on Twitter as well. Hashtag SABC Media and Society. We've got another discussion, though, on the other side of this. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Media and Society. So there is a clear distinction between journalism and public relations. It's considered unethical for one to be a journalist, to be in journalism and public relations at the same time, for some. But for decades, it's been known that there are many journalists who then cross over to public relations. Well, we visited one of them, basic education spokesperson Elijah Mhlanga. Let's take a look.
Elijah Mhlanga is a political science graduate from the University of Natal with a vast experience in the media industry.
The report says there are 6.2 million people who survive in the second economy, but most of them remain marginalized. It says although South Africa is one of the 50 richest nations in the world, unemployment levels have reached chronic levels, and now government has been urged to develop a coherent strategy to help the poor.
His career began in the newsroom before he joined government as the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education.
The role of a spokesperson, and a government spokesperson in particular, is to communicate to the public the work that your department is doing, the work that government is doing. It's important that we communicate, because we need to make sure that the responsibility that we've been given by the people to deliver services is taken seriously, and the only way to explain to people what we're doing is to update them on a regular basis.
Like many in his position of government communicator, he started his career in the newsroom as a journalist.
I think I'm fortunate to have worked in the newsrooms for newspaper, which is where I started. I also worked in a radio newsroom, and I worked in the television newsroom. So I've had the benefit of experiencing what takes place in the three media forms, and that has enriched the experience that I have brought to the department.
Mhlanga says working as a communicator has its own challenges like any other job.
In basic education, I always advise my colleagues that are in provinces that you need to be mentally fit, because you'll be challenged on all sorts of issues, from teachers to curriculum to discipline issues in schools to infrastructure, and all of these things that happen. You need to understand them in detail so that you're able to address the media with those issues. That's the first part. But secondly, you need to be physically fit, because you must be able to go to every school when something is happening, at least attempt to do that. Because you can't rest. Answers are expected of you. You need to be able to interact with the teachers, the district directors, the learners themselves, and all of that.
We asked if he believes some spokespersons were working as spin doctors or defenders of the truth.
No, it's not about defending the truth. It's misunderstood. Maybe some do that, but the ones that I work with, they don't do that. We don't defend the truth. We try to educate people. We know, for example, we release government gazettes with documents this thick. We know that people don't read those documents, so we try to break it down. And as we do that, we find that people misunderstand these things, and then that misunderstanding will inform some of the things that the media would report on. And then it's my responsibility to dispute what the media would have said and clarify.
He says young media practitioners should focus on building themselves with knowledge first, which will then help them grow.
You need to read a lot. It's very important. You become a better communicator by reading, expanding your knowledge. We say in basic education, read to lead. Leaders are readers. And if you are well read, then you are more likely to do the right thing, because it will expand your comprehension of how systems work. 1, 2, it will expand your vocabulary. It will make you a better communicator, because you'll be able to see how other people express themselves on different things. So that will help. But do go for the qualification. You can either go for journalism or you can go for communication itself. And make sure that you then get experience after that.
Well, Elijah Mhlanga left the profession of journalism and he never returned. Now, XRPR says journalists work to serve the public and public relations practitioners serve their clients. So the two are clearly not the same thing. But really, the lines do get blurred in the modern world of journalism and PR. But joining me to have this discussion, I am joined by Leranzu Themba, who studied journalism at the Tshwane University of Technology to later work for the SABC's Channel Africa and then ENCA. She is now the police minister's spokesperson, and I'm also joined by Mr. Themba Sipotekele, who is a media trainer. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
This is an interesting discussion, because I've seen it in the industry a lot where you do have a media practitioner who has a side hustle where they're doing PR and then they're doing something for government. Let me start with you, Leranzu. What was it for you that made you move from journalism into representing government?
And this is a question I'm often asked, Naledi. And to be honest, it was really about growth, personal growth. I think we all want to achieve that. I was in a newsroom for quite a while. You mentioned part of my history in the newsroom.
We dug up the files, yes.
You have. You have. But also, I just felt like I could make a contribution to government. And I believe that is one of the steps that is being taken towards that sort of journey. So it was about growth. It was about also just trying to expand my thinking process. Can I do it? Can I leave the newsroom and do something else? And it would seem 3 years later, that's exactly what's happening. And
Would you, after having left the newsroom and gone into being a spokesperson for the Department of Police, come back to journalism?
I think you always are a journalist. It's a conversation that we had offline with Themba. There's always going to be that base for you as a journalist, especially if you don't, check out things like your ethics, in whatever job that you're going to be taking up. I believe that if you're honest enough in your approach, especially as a communicator, you don't necessarily tarnish your reputation. Journalism should not be something that's necessarily far off. Whether you're going to be a practicing journalist, that's a different story, I guess. I mean, journalism was my life. It's something that I've always wanted to do ever since I was a child, believe it or not. I've never wanted anything else. But I'm also very privileged and very glad that I'm able to expand myself out of the newsroom and find my feet in the communication environment, which is what has happened.
Yeah, and I know you're writing a book about this, aren't you, Themba?
Yep.
You're writing a book about journalists who leave the newsroom and go and represent structures.
I'm actually, for the last 10 years, I've been doing research and writing articles, and then that led to me saying that why can't I put a book together on government communications, political communications. That also includes journalists who left the media and became spokespersons. Because truth is, in most cases, there are those who, some of us who are journalists, who when they cross the floor, they become something else. They become something quite embarrassing. There are those who, when as soon as they become government spokespersons, they become gatekeepers of information, and they are the ones who really go and tarnish the journalism. So the discussion we had with Ranzo was asking me, why do I consider myself? I, Themba Sipotekele, I consider myself as a journalist. I studied journalism. I am a journalist. Whatever I'm doing is just an add-on. Being a communicator, being a media trainer, being a journalism lecturer, I am a journalist. Everything is rooted into that kind of film foundation. So the book I'm writing is about government communicators. And I'm trying to put it together in a fashion that I'm trying to bring the likes of Leranzo, the like of Elijah, who normally don't get honored and celebrated. Like their counterparts in the media, because we normally host awards for the media. Recently I attended the Sanlam Financial Challenge of the Awards. And I'm sitting there, I'm saying, but when do we sit and honor and celebrate government communicators who are doing well? So that the rotten potatoes get singled out. Those who go and write wrong things on Facebook, start insulting people, those who are fighting journalists. And I say, this is a very simple and important profession and craft. What you have to do, you have to build relations with the media. Her job description says that build relations with the media. Preside and chair media press conferences, do interviews on behalf of the minister. Nowhere it goes and say, fights the media, insults the media. So those who normally egg me, because I get very agitated when they do that, and when they do that, I just put pen into paper. I just write as a journalist, I say, no, but this cannot happen. And unfortunately, by so doing and telling the truth, you invite enemies, but it's fine as long as I've told the truth and I'll keep on telling the truth. There are good spokespersons. There are, however, few rotten potatoes who are spoiling the bag.
I think that what the real concern here is that you have a journalist perhaps who moves to go work for a particular structure that has a certain angle that they look at things in, a certain perspective, right, that is different to another. One wonders then if a journalist decides to join a political structure, right, does it mean that even when they were operating as a journalist that they protected that view that they're moving towards because they knew that that's where their bread is going to be buttered?
I guess that's addressed to me.
Yeah, I'll give it to you, yes. Yeah.
I mean, you raise a very important question, which is something that has been spoken about not only in newsrooms, but also in government communication spaces. You know, are you communicating positively because you know that at some point I will work for this organization, but yet this is where the ethics conversation comes in, which is what I mentioned earlier on, because we know that as journalists there is that ethics level that we just cannot discard.
Yes.
And you know, that is why it would be unfortunate if a journalist would then have to, you know, report favorably towards a certain organization because you know that you're going to be working for it. In fact, that's something that, I mean, I was reporting on police. I was an all-rounder journalist in a newsroom. I reported on police, I reported on politics, I reported on various sort of
and reported negatively on police as well.
Absolutely.
Covered the negatives. Yes.
Absolutely. And this is why now my job in this current form is not to protect the police. It is to communicate what their policies are, what their messaging is, and whether it's positive or negative. You know, someone said this very recently, if I may, to say that an organization, when you see the cracks that are starting to form, you are going to see that it's going to shine through in the communications.
Right.
And if an organization is doing fairly well,
it'll show
in the communications.
Right. I mean, let's take a call quickly. Kondile's on the line in Bloemfontein. Kondile, good morning to you.
Morning, Nadedi and Temba and your other guest.
Nadedi,
yes. This is a very, very broad subject for me because if you are to look at it, if you talk about a spokesperson, you are talking about the higher echelon of communications either in the department or government itself. And it then means that person would require certain things, and the Temba has alluded to them, experience, composure, authority, but most of all, Nadedi, content, because government communications is not journalism. And Lorenzo grabs it very well there to say you facilitate the information, but as a spokesperson also, you need a certain level of experience for you to understand the distinction between journalism and communication itself. But there is something else, Naledi, that I want to bring into that, because below the field itself, you also have your up and coming people who would want to get in as communicators as well as social media people and so. And this is where the opportunity for younger people with less experience comes into factor. And I want Temba to capture that properly because Temba, we don't have time to be editing videos and so forth. We want to deal with the content. We want to deal with the image of an office that we manage.
Right.
So those
okay.
are the dynamics
So
that have to be understood.
Okay, I get that point, Kondile. Thank you so much for calling. But and unfortunately, I'm out of time, and I wish we had more time for this discussion. But really, what matters here, Temba, is not about what happens between journalists and the communications specialists that work within government, for instance. What's important is that the viewer, the receiver of media, can trust that Naledi is an ethical journalist and not side hustling for government and then hence a side spokesperson for government, and that ethical line is clear for the viewer.
In journalism and also in government communications, ethics matters. And I'll say that. I teach government communication and I take communicators to a session where I say, look yourself in the mirror, develop 10 ethics that you want the society to judge you by. They sit there and say that, Temba, we're not aware that we have to have ethics. I'm saying, go there, develop a set of ethics that you want me as a reader, as a viewer, to judge you with. Honesty is one of them.
Yeah.
Impartiality is one of them. Truthful is one of them. So, and also say, build relations with the media, with journalists. Don't kill them.
When are we getting the book?
Late this year.
Okay. Leranzo, I know we'll see you all the time, right next to Minister Pegitele, and of course, always speaking to the media as well. And of course, Leranzo, one of the more accessible spokespeople within our government. Thank you so much for speaking to us, police spokesperson Leranzo Temba, and of course, media trainer Mr. Temba Sepotekele. That's how we wrap things up. Thank you so much for watching Media and Society. We hope that you'll join us again, same time, same place, and next week. For me and the rest of the team, have yourselves a blessed Sunday.